When most people think about soldiers cooking food in World War II, they picture campfires, mess kits, and smoke rising behind the lines. That image is comfortable, but it's also dangerously misleading. On the front, fire was often forbidden, impractical, or outright suicidal. A single spark could reveal a position, attract artillery, or expose a patrol deep behind enemy lines. Yet soldiers still had to eat. Calories were not optional. Warmth was not guaranteed, and stopping to cook was often impossible. What kept men alive in those moments was not equipment issued by generals, but quiet improvisation learned through experience, shared trench to trench, and refined under pressure. These cooking hacks were not about comfort. They were about survival. What makes them worth studying today is that they work without electricity, without fuel, and without modern gear. They are lessons written by necessity, and honestly, they still hold value for anyone interested in real-world resilience. How soldiers learned to make rations edible using nothing but time and moisture. One of the most common fireless techniques was controlled soaking. Hard biscuits, dried grains, and compressed rations were nearly inedible straight from the pack. Soldiers learned to break these foods down using water and patience. By crumbling hardtack or dried bread into canteens, helmets or mess tins and letting it soak for hours, they softened food enough to digest without cooking. In cold conditions, this soaking often happened inside clothing, where body heat accelerated the process. Today, the same principle applies to cold soaking oats, rice flakes, or dehydrated foods in sealed containers, allowing digestion without flame or electricity. How body heat became a substitute for fire when movement was constant. When soldiers were on the move, they used their own bodies as slow, reliable heat sources. Rations were wrapped in cloth, paper, or spare socks and tucked under armpits, against the abdomen, or inside jackets. This warmed fats, softened meats, and improved palatability over time. Chocolate bars, cheese, and canned meats became easier to eat after hours of contact with body heat. In modern terms, this method mirrors using insulation and time rather than active heating, something still effective during travel, power outages, or stealth situations where heat signatures must be minimized. How vehicle and machinery heat was quietly exploited whenever possible. Soldiers operating near trucks, tanks, or generators quickly learned that warm metal was a gift. Food containers placed near engine blocks, exhaust shields, or warm surfaces could heat gradually without flame. This was done discreetly and briefly, often while equipment was already running. Even a few minutes of contact improved taste and digestibility. The modern equivalent would be safely using waste heat from machinery, vehicles, or industrial environments rather than dedicated cooking systems. So, when flames just weren't possible, chemical reactions actually stepped in as a substitute for fire. Now, it wasn't exactly widespread, but certain units got pretty creative, improvising chemical heating with things like quicklime or other reactive compounds you might find in construction or engineering supplies. When these substances were carefully mixed with water, they produced heat, no flame needed. Soldiers would use this trick to warm up small amounts of food in sealed containers. This whole idea eventually became formalized in what we now call flameless ration heaters. And honestly, understanding how to control chemical heat is still pretty relevant today, especially in survival kits and emergency rations that rely on the exact same reaction. Fermentation, well, it quietly worked its magic by turning raw ingredients into something digestible. In those long, drawn-out positions, soldiers sometimes had to rely on early-stage fermentation. Bread dough, grain mash, or even vegetable matter mixed with water would start breaking down naturally over time, which made the nutrients a bit more accessible, even if you couldn't cook. Of course, this took a bit of caution, but experience taught folks which foods could safely soften and sour without turning dangerous. These days, modern survivalists use pretty similar methods, soaking grains, using sourdough starters, or fermenting vegetables to boost nutrition without any heat at all. The sun and just plain ambient warmth were actually used more deliberately than you might expect. In warmer climates, soldiers would spread their food out on dark surfaces right in the sunlight. Metal helmets, blackened tins, or even stones would soak up enough solar heat to warm rations a little bit. It wasn't really cooking in the usual sense, but it did improve morale and made the food a bit easier to digest. Even today, solar warming is still a solid low-tech option, especially if you've got reflective surfaces and dark containers to work with. You know, fat management made raw food not just safer, but honestly a lot more effective. Fat was absolutely critical. Soldiers figured out that, well, mixing fats with dry or raw foods made them so much easier to digest and, frankly, a lot more filling. Grease from canned meats was never wasted. It was saved and added to soaked biscuits or grains. Fat slowed digestion, improved calorie uptake, and, reduced hunger. Even today, the modern application is about pairing shelf-stable fats with uncooked staples to keep your energy up without needing any heat. So, portion timing actually replaced traditional cooking schedules. Instead of eating big, full meals, soldiers would graze strategically throughout the day. Taking in small amounts regularly helped prevent those nasty energy crashes and reduce the digestive strain that came from eating cold food. This pacing let the body handle uncooked rations a lot more efficiently. And honestly, it's still a pretty sound strategy during emergencies when food quality is, well, less than ideal. Now, here's the thing. Mental discipline mattered just as much as any technique. Maybe the most overlooked hack was really mindset. Soldiers accepted that food was fuel, not pleasure. By lowering their expectations and focusing on the function of eating, they avoided waste and hesitation. This psychological adaptation, it allowed them to survive on methods most civilians would probably reject outright. Even in modern crises, this mindset is just as important as any physical skill you might have. These World War II soldier cooking hacks, well, they were born in moments where failure meant death, not just inconvenience. They worked because they respected biology, physics and discipline, not comfort. If you value history that actually teaches usable lessons, do consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into wartime survival knowledge that still, honestly, matters today. And go ahead, share this video with someone who understands that resilience is learned, not inherited.